Hi, this video is called Is Heaven Like a Borg Cube?
What?
Might sound like a strange question, but you might be surprised by the answer. But before I can actually answer the question, I first of all have to lay out what do I mean when I say heaven. Now, in this video, I'm going to be looking at things from a biblical perspective. And believe it or not, in the Bible, there's actually three different sort of types of heaven when the word heaven is used.
What?
Also, when we say the word heaven, we're seeing the translation of the word heaven from either the original in Hebrew or Greek, depending on which text it was. So first of all, I need to lay out the three different types of heaven that we see in the Bible. So because the word heaven in the English language is translated from these other words, it sometimes gets mixed up. It sometimes means more than just one thing. Now, this is quite self-evident in the Bible, and we're going to call these three heavens. First heaven, I'm going to call the air, second heaven, space, and the third, God's throne room. So the first one, sometimes the word heaven is used to describe just the atmosphere, the air where the birds are. And some of the scriptures that back this up are Job 12, verse 7, and Ezekiel 31, verse 6. For the sake of time in this video, I'm not going to read all the scriptures. I'm just going to flash them up on screen and you can read them in your own time. And because there's lots of different translations of the Bible now, quite often it will just say the word sky rather than the word heaven, although in the original language it would have been translated as heaven. So that's the first one. It's our atmosphere where the birds fly. It sometimes mentions the fowls of heaven, the birds of heaven, that kind of thing. Okay, so the second heaven, that is the one where the stars, the moon, and the sun inhabit. Again, there are various scriptures where heaven is referenced, talking about the place where the sun and the moon are. Some examples of this are the visions in Revelation 12, and also Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 19. And quickly, just lastly, the third heaven is the one known as God's throne room. And so this one isn't in the air, it isn't in space, it is a spiritual place where God the Father dwells and angels can also be present. For this one of the good references is the book of Job, and in particular verse 1, verses 6 and 7. Now this one I will actually read. It says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' Satan answered the Lord, 'From roaming through the earth, going back and forth on it.'" So notice here, Satan is no longer on the earth. He says he's come from the earth, and God had asked him, "Where have you come from?" So that quite clearly implies he's not there at the time. He's in the presence of God, God the Father. Now that also might come as a little bit of a surprise to you if you didn't realize that Satan currently can actually go right to the throne of God and accuse us to God. In fact, there is a scripture where it says that he is the accuser of the brethren. He accuses us day and night before the throne. There's also Revelation 4, verses 1 to 3, and I'll quickly read those for you as well. "After this I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I had first heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, 'Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this.' At once I was in the Spirit." So there you go, that's what I was talking about earlier. It's a spiritual place, this one. "At once I was in the Spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven, with someone sitting on it. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. A rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne." So this is the third heaven I'm talking about, God's throne room. And it's a spiritual place. And if you've seen my previous video about the hypothetical fifth dimension, I think this is where it comes into play. This could either be the fifth, sixth, seventh dimension. I don't know, but basically one that isn't part of our 4 dimensions currently. So that's the first bit, just to show you that when the Bible talks about heaven, there's actually 3 different heavens. There's not one, there's 3 different heavens.
What?
But what about this Borg cube thing that I'm talking about? Why on earth would I compare heaven to a Borg cube? Well, that's because, believe it or not, the Bible actually talks about a 4th heaven. But this one is a future one that is still to come. It doesn't actually appear until right near the very end of time itself. And even though I'm calling it a heaven, it's referred to in the Bible as the New Jerusalem or the Bride of Christ. You might hear of something called the Bride of Christ or the New Jerusalem, and that's what I'm speaking about. But it's effectively a place where God meets with people. It is, to all intents and purposes, kind of the final heaven, and I'll explain that in a bit. So first of all, I just need to dispel a myth. Whenever you hear the word heaven, and particularly in the media, if you see heaven depicted, it's kind of like this, like that over there. And I have to tell you that this is absolute nonsense. At nowhere in the Bible do I see heaven depicted. Can't get this right. Like that over there. Now you might be thinking, but I've heard about the pearly gates. There's, the pearly gates of heaven. But those pearly gates are actually part of the Borg cube type heaven. Resistance is futile. Okay, so where am I getting this idea that there's going to be some kind of heaven or new heaven called the New Jerusalem, that's some kind of cube or big Borg type cube thing? Where am I getting that from? Well, it's from the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 21. Now, bear in mind that this is after Christ has returned to the earth and after he's actually reigned on the earth for 1,000 years. And there's a few things that happen according to the book of Revelation, but there's something called the Great White Throne Judgment. And at that point, basically, the current heaven and the current earth passes away. Or heavens, I should say. The current heavens and earth are destroyed by fervent heat, just completely gone.
What?
And I'll show you where it says that. I'll do that now. So here we have Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. So that's where we get the saying, the bride of Christ, or the New Jerusalem. It's from this bit here. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eye. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." Now that sounds pretty good to me. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain. That sounds like the kind of place I want to be. He who is seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." Okay, so far so good, but where do I get this idea that it's a cube? Well, from Revelation 21, verse 10 onwards, all the way until Revelation 22, verse 5, it actually goes into very descriptive detail about this city. And it actually says that it is, I believe it's 12,000 stadia, which it works out at 2,222 kilometers, I believe, roughly 1,300 miles, I think, lengthways, width, length, and height, all the same. So what it looks like is more like this. Ta-da! The Borg cube flying down out of the new heavens onto the new earth. Resistance is futile. And this Borg cube type thing is also where the pearly gates are. There are 12 gates, 3 on each side. Now, I'm not going to read all of those verses here for you, but if you want to check it out, just look at the book of Revelation, chapters 21 and 22. Now, I have to admit that the cube thing is actually a bit of an assumption, because all it actually says is that the length, width, and height, it doesn't stipulate the shape. So technically, it could be a pyramid and still fit the attributes. Or it could be like half a cube with a dome on the top. We really just don't know. The book of Revelation doesn't make it that clear. But some artists have depicted it as a cube, some as a pyramid. Take your pick, we just really don't know at this stage. Now, I did a little bit of maths to do with this, the size of this cube and the Earth. Now, I'm going to make an assumption here, so I might be wrong on this. But if the new Earth is created in the same dimensions as the old Earth, the current Earth, then it would look a little bit like this. So here I printed out a circle about 12.74 centimeters. I made a centimeter for every 10,000 kilometers because the Earth's diameter is around about 12,742 kilometers. And this New Jerusalem city that comes down out of heaven is going to be this size here. So that's what it would look like on the current Earth. So it would go well out into space. But obviously, anybody who's allowed in here doesn't need to breathe. At that point, they'll be an immortal being. And over here, the same thing, but the sort of pyramid type version. Now, again, that's just based on the current Earth. It does say in Revelation 21 that there's going to be a new heavens and new Earth. So the Earth may be very much bigger, and so it may seem flatter where the city lies. I just don't know. It could be 200 times the size of Earth, or it could be a completely different shape. Who knows? God will do whatever he wants to do. But what I'm just trying to highlight to you with this video is that the depiction of heaven that you see in the media, you know, this thing here is just not how the final heaven is depicted in the Bible at all. As I've shown from Revelation 21, it's nothing really like this at all. I mean, for starters, it actually descends down onto the earth, onto the new earth. It doesn't just hang around in the clouds. So, for believers in Christianity, if Christianity turns out to be true, are they destined to be assimilated into the Borg? In a way, kind of yes. I bet you weren't expecting that one, were you? But it's in the Bible. Go check it out. I'm telling you, if anybody tells you that the Bible is boring, they're wrong. There's loads of interesting stuff in there. So just to do a quick recap, what I'm pointing out in this video is that from the biblical perspective, there are three heavens mentioned. There's the air, there's space, there's God's throne room, and then there's a future thing called the New Jerusalem, also known as the Bride of Christ, which is this cube-like or, well, possibly cube-like or pyramid-type city, this massive city, which is going to come down from the new heaven onto the new earth. And my personal speculation is that the believers will be able to go from the city onto the new earth and vice versa. That's it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you found something interesting about it. Maybe it opened your mind a little bit about what the Bible actually says as opposed to the way the media portray a depiction of heaven. If you like my content, then please hang around, subscribe and all that stuff. And remember that resistance is futile.